The night my wife told me to divorce her, I was already holding the answer in my hand. I just didn't know it yet. The twist is this. She thought she was calling my bluff. I don't bluff. I was sitting on the couch after dinner, half listening to the television, half scrolling my phone, when she walked into the living room with that expression that shuts conversations down before they even start. Arms crossed, jaw set, no warmth in her eyes. That look that says, "This is happening whether you like it or not." Before we go any further, do me a favor. Hit subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment if you've ever had a moment that split your life into before and after. Trust me, you'll want to stay for this. She didn't sit down. She didn't ease into it. She just stood there like a manager delivering bad news. "I'm going on a trip next week," she said, "leaving Friday morning. Back the following Friday." I looked up. "A whole week. A trip?" I asked. "Where?" "Beach resort," she replied. "Some people from work are going." Some people. That phrase landed wrong. For 6 months, one name had been popping up in our house more than any other: Mark. Mark said this. Mark suggested that. Mark thought it would be funny. Mark was brilliant at work. Mark had opinions about everything. Mark, is Mark going? I asked. She didn't pause. Yeah, he organized it. Him, Laura from accounting, and a couple others. A week at a beach resort, with the man whose messages made her smile at dinner. The man she'd stayed late with more times than I could count. "So you're telling me," I said slowly, "that you're going on a week-long trip with Mark, and you're just now mentioning it?" She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled them. "It's not like that. We're adults. Colleagues. People can travel together without it being some big dramatic thing." "When did you plan this?" "A few weeks ago." A few weeks. She'd known for weeks and chose tonight, the night before she started packing, to tell me. I sat up straighter. "And it never occurred to you to ask if I was okay with this?" That's when her face changed. The fake patience vanished. What replaced it was cold, sharp, and unfamiliar. "I'm not asking permission," she said. "I'm going. And if you don't like my choices, then get a divorce." The words just hung there. Calm. Casual. Like she was daring me to react. Like she expected me to fold, apologize, maybe even thank her for being honest. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And something inside me clicked into place. This wasn't the woman I married. Or maybe it was, and I'd just been refusing to see it that I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I nodded once. "Got it." She blinked, clearly expecting a fight. "That's it. That's it." She shrugged and turned toward the bedroom. "Good. I'm packing tonight. My flight's early." I listened to her pulling suitcases from the closet, humming like she didn't have a care in the world, like she hadn't just tossed our marriage onto the table and walked away from it. I picked up my phone again, but I wasn't scrolling anymore. I was thinking, quietly, carefully. The next morning, she was already dressed, makeup done, dragging her suitcase toward the front door. A new sundress I'd never seen before. "Probably bought just for this trip. I'll text you when I land," she said, eyes on her phone. "Have fun," I replied. She paused, suspicious of my tone, then shrugged and left. I watched her load the car, check her reflection in the mirror, smile at herself, and drive away without looking back once. And in that moment, standing alone in the quiet house, I realized something important. She'd just given me permission to stop trying. That was the real beginning. The house felt strangely quiet after she left. Not empty, just still, like it was waiting to see what I would do next. I stood by the window longer than I needed to, watching the street even after her car disappeared. 7 years of marriage reduced to tire marks on asphalt and the faint scent of her perfume still hanging in the air. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel heartbreak. What I felt was something sharper and cleaner. Clarity that I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and typed 2 words I never imagined searching for. Divorce attorney. My hands didn't shake. My breathing was steady. It surprised me how calm I was. Maybe because this hadn't started last night. Maybe because I'd been slowly letting go for months without realizing I teed up by mid-morning. I had a list. I called the first number. A man named Richard Collins answered. Direct voice, no nonsense. We spoke for 20 minutes. He asked questions, I gave facts. 7 years married. No kids. House in my name, bought before the wedding. Separate cars. One shared checking account. When I mentioned the trip, his pause was brief but telling. And she told you to divorce her if you didn't like it? He asked, word for word. All right, he said. Come in tomorrow. I spent the rest of that day walking through my own home like a guest. I noticed things I hadn't before. How much of the decor had been her taste? How many of her things filled spaces she barely used anymore? Her coffee mug still sat by the sink, untouched. Her jacket hung by the door, even though she hadn't worn it in weeks. It was like living in a museum of a marriage that had already ended, just waiting for someone to turn off the lights. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious, but because my mind kept replaying the past 6 months, scene by scene, like it was finally allowing me to see the truth without softening the edges. The late nights that started once in a while and turned into routine. The way she'd smile at her phone but barely look at me. The conversations that never went deeper than logistics. Groceries, bills, schedules. We'd stopped talking like partners long before we stopped acting like a couple. The next afternoon, I sat across from Richard in his office. He was in his late 50s, gray hair, calm eyes. The kind of man who'd seen every version of betrayal imaginable and wasn't impressed by drama. He slid papers across the desk, explaining things clearly, efficiently. No promises, no lectures, just process. We'll file this week, he said. She'll be served after she returns. I asked if I could handle it myself. I wanted to see her face when reality landed. He nodded, warning me not to engage emotionally, not to argue, not to explain. Let the paperwork speak, he said. It always does. When I got home, I didn't pour a drink or call a friend. I started packing. Not mine, hers. Methodically, neatly, clothes folded, shoes paired, toiletries boxed, books stacked. I labeled everything. Guest room. I wasn't angry while I did it. I was focused. There's a difference. Halfway through the second night, my phone rang. It was my friend Jason. We'd known each other since college. How are you holding up? He asked carefully. I'm handling it, I said. That usually means something big, he replied. It does. I'll tell you when it's done. I didn't want opinions. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted this finished cleanly. Thursday came and went quietly. I worked from home, answered emails, joined meetings, acted normal while my life reorganized itself around a decision that felt inevitable. That evening, she finally texted something more than a weather update. Can't wait to be home tomorrow. Miss you. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Miss you. The words felt hollow. I didn't respond. Friday morning, I woke early. Coffee, shower, button-down shirt. The document sat on the table inside a plain envelope. Her boxes waited in the guest room, visible on purpose. I checked the time. Her flight landed at 2. I didn't rush. I didn't pace. I just waited at 3:15. I heard her car in the driveway. The sound echoed through the house like a starting gun. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked into the kitchen. My heart was beating hard, but my mind was steady. The door opened. She stepped inside, tanned, smiling, dragging her suitcase behind her like she was returning from the best week of her life. She had no idea how much had changed while she was gone. She rolled her suitcase into the kitchen like nothing had changed, like the past week had been a normal business trip and not a line she'd crossed without looking back. I'm exhausted, she said, opening the fridge. Airplane food was awful. She leaned against the counter, completely at ease, scrolling her phone with one hand while poking at leftovers with the other. No apology, no hesitation, no awareness of the tension filling the room. You're quiet, she said finally, glancing at me. Welcome home, I replied evenly. She smiled. Thanks. The resort was incredible. Perfect weather. We had such a great time. We. The word hung there, loud and careless. She didn't notice. She kept talking, describing sunsets and cocktails and how relaxed she felt, like she'd returned refreshed instead of reckless. Then she looked at me again, eyes narrowing slightly. So, did you think about what I said before I left? I tilted my head. About the divorce? Yes, she said, too casually. I meant it. I need space. I need my own life. If you can't handle that, then we shouldn't be married. I nodded once. You're right. She blinked. What? You're right, I repeated. We should reconsider this. She laughed, uncertain. Okay, and what does that mean? I gestured toward the table behind her. Why don't you take a look? She turned slowly and saw the envelope. Her smile faded. Confusion crossed her face first, then something closer to fear. She picked it up, opened it, and pulled out the papers. I watched the color drain from her face as she read. Her hands started to shake. What is this? She whispered. Divorce papers, I said. Like you suggested. She looked up at me, eyes wide. You're joking. I'm not. You can't be serious. I am. She scanned the pages again, faster now. You filed these while I was gone. Yes. Her voice rose. You didn't even talk to me. You didn't call. You told me to get a divorce if I didn't like your choices. I didn't like them. She slammed the papers onto the table. I didn't think you'd actually do it. That's clear. She paced the kitchen, running her hands through her hair. This is insane. You're throwing away 7 years over one trip. It wasn't one trip, I said quietly. It was months of distance, secrecy, and disrespect. The trip just made it impossible to ignore. She stopped pacing and looked at me sharply. Nothing happened with Mark. I didn't respond. The lie didn't deserve air. Her tone shifted, defensive now. You've been suffocating me. That's why I needed space. Suffocating you by asking to spend time together? By wondering where you were at night. That's not. She stopped herself, then changed tactics. We can fix this. Counseling. Talking. Divorce is extreme. What's extreme is telling your husband to divorce you and being shocked when he does. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Where are my things? She asked abruptly. Guest room. Packed. Her eyes widened. You packed my things. Yes. All of them. Yes. She walked down the hall, and I heard her stop short when she saw the boxes. Neatly stacked. Labeled. Her life reduced to cardboard. She came back furious. You had no right to touch my stuff. You'll need it when you leave. When I leave, this house is in my name. You have until tomorrow morning. Her face flushed. We're married. Not for long. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I'm calling my mother. Go ahead. While she spoke in a panicked whisper, I sat down and opened my laptop, answering emails like nothing unusual was happening. When she hung up, her voice broke. She's coming. You're going to explain this. I will. When her mother arrived, the air turned sharp instantly. Accusations flew. I stayed calm, repeated facts, didn't raise my voice. Eventually, they gathered boxes. She glared at me through tears. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. I don't think so. She left with the first load of her things, slamming the door behind her. The house fell silent again. I stood there for a long moment, listening to that silence. It wasn't lonely. It was final. The door closed behind them, and the sound echoed longer than it should have. I didn't move right away. I just stood there in the living room, surrounded by the quiet, listening to a house that finally felt like it belonged to me again. No accusations. No sighs. No tension buzzing under every conversation. Just silence. Clean, honest silence that I picked up my phone and made one call. The locksmith answered on the second ring. How soon can you come out? About an hour, he said. Perfect. I sat down at the kitchen table while I waited. For the first time all week, my hands shook a little, not from doubt, but from release. When the adrenaline fades, reality settles in. I didn't second-guess myself. I just let the moment land. Around 7, the locks were changed. New keys. Old ones useless. The locksmith packed up and left with a nod like he'd seen this story before. I tested the door twice, then once more, just to be sure. The house was secure. So was my decision. I ordered dinner and ate slowly, actually tasting the food instead of rushing through it. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Buzzed again. Ignored it again. On the fifth call, I answered. "We need to talk," she said, her voice controlled but strained. "No, we don't. Please," she said. "Just listen. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There hasn't." She asked if she could come back over. I said no. She accused me of being stubborn. I almost laughed at that. Then the apologies came. Soft, careful, measured. She said she'd made a mistake. Said she loved me. Said she didn't want the marriage to end. Funny how love shows up when consequences arrive. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want this to be over," I replied. She was quiet for a long moment. "You're really doing this?" "Yes." I hung up and turned my phone off. The next morning, there were missed calls and messages waiting. "Please." Promises. One message slipped in sharp and angry, talking about rights and regret. I deleted them all without replying. Monday morning, I went back to work. Jason stopped by my desk and studied my face. "You look different," he said. "I feel different." He nodded like he understood. That afternoon, Richard called. Her attorney reached out, he said. "They want to talk terms." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied. "I told them the same," he said. "Just stay the course." The rest of the week passed quietly. No surprise visits. No scenes. Either she was regrouping or someone smarter than her had told her to stop. Friday evening, I was at the grocery store when I ran into Laura, the coworker who was supposedly part of that beach trip. She looked uncomfortable seeing me. I asked one simple question. She hesitated, then admitted she hadn't gone. Family issue. It wasn't the answer that mattered. It was the confirmation of what I already knew. Later that night, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. It was her. Long, emotional, full of memories and apologies that never touched the real issue. No accountability, just fear of loss. I read it once, then forwarded it to Richard and closed my laptop. That I slept better that night than I had in months. Not because everything was resolved, but because I'd stopped betraying myself to keep the peace. 3 weeks later, my phone rang while I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee, sunlight coming through the window like it finally had permission to be there. It was Richard. I answered without hesitation. "She signed," he said. For a moment, I didn't respond. Not because I was shocked, but because I felt something settle. Something heavy I'd been carrying without realizing it was there. "She signed." I repeated. "Yes," he said. Her attorney explained the situation. "No leverage. No upside to dragging it out. It's done. We're just waiting on the court date, but that's a formality." After I hung up, I sat there longer than necessary, staring at nothing in particular. 7 years. Reduced to a signature and a quiet phone call. I expected sadness, regret, maybe anger. What I felt instead was relief. Not excitement, not victory, just relief, like stepping outside after months in a stuffy room. The court date came and went quickly. 10 minutes in front of a judge. A few questions, a few signatures. Then it was over. I walked out of the building alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I felt finished, like a chapter had finally been closed instead of constantly reread. Jason was waiting for me outside. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Lighter," I said. And it was the truth. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. It became simpler. I settled into routines that felt like mine. Work, gym, evenings that didn't feel tense, weekends that didn't require negotiating someone else's mood. I reconnected with friends I'd slowly drifted from without noticing. I laughed more, slept better, ate meals without feeling like I was doing something wrong by enjoying myself. A couple months later, I saw her in a parking lot. She looked tired, thinner, older somehow. She saw me too, then quickly looked away and hurried to her car. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just distance. That's how I knew I'd truly moved on. Jason later mentioned he'd heard she'd tried reconnecting with Mark. Apparently, that door had already closed. It didn't matter to me. Whatever happened after wasn't my responsibility anymore. She made her choices. I made mine. 6 months after the divorce, I went on a date. Just coffee. No pressure. Easy conversation. Genuine laughter. On the drive home, something hit me. I was happy. Not pretending. Not enduring. Just happy. She told me to get a divorce if I didn't like her choices. Best advice she ever gave me. To if this story resonated with you, do me a favor, subscribe, hit like, and leave a comment. It helps more than you know, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for listening.